Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Super Fast Income. Today, with me, Piers Thurston from Quality of Mind. Quality of Mind is a new before psychology approach, which is something different from the traditional coaching. Piers, you have been into the coaching industry for more than 25 years. So, what's that you've seen into human potential that brought you to develop this new approach?
Well, Christian, firstly, hello. Nice to be here, and thanks for inviting me on to talk. So, yeah, as you say, I've been around coaching for a long time, and I'm always looking to share what is the most powerful thing I can for my clients that are going to make the biggest difference in their life and in their work. And as my evolution of a coach over the last couple of decades, I've sort of come across different approaches, and it's really in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years that I've seen something that is really transformative. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. So first 10 years of my coaching, I was into using a lot of psychological approaches to mindset, to setting goals, to people understanding their values, to changing limiting beliefs, to getting in peak performance state, using approaches like neurolinguistic programming, which people may have heard of, NLP, positive psychology, even things like hypnotherapy, timeline therapy, EFT, symbolic modeling, lots and lots of tools and techniques. Now, they had some effect. I mean, I was successful in what I did for 10 years. However, I then, in about sort of 2008, 2009, came across something that sort of turned all that on its head. And I didn't realize at the time how much. Because what it did is it started to point to the fact that a lot of what we're doing with our psychology, trying to get a better mindset, trying to be more positive, trying to see the silver lining, trying to break through our beliefs, actually is innocently getting in the way of the innate potential that we all have. So if I can use a little metaphor here and see whether this works for you, accidentally, invisibly, what we're up to is we're kind of in the shower trying to get dry, but we haven't turned the water off, right? So it'd be like trying to towel yourself dry in the shower, not realizing the tap's still on. It doesn't work that well. It kind of works. Maybe you can dodge some of the water. So because what we've done is the personal development industry has developed a whole bunch of psychological strategies, and there's thousands of books and courses you can go on. Here are the best mindsets to have to do this. Here's a tool for this. Here's a technique for this. Now, what we're pointing to with quality of mind and what we call before psychology is to explore something that we don't normally explore, which is quite profound at one level. It's quite foundational and fundamental, which means once it's realized, it affects absolutely every aspect of reality. So that's from everything in your life, of course, including your work. Now, you might be thinking, well, what is this thing we're exploring that we don't really know about to explore? And suddenly you're going to tell us. Well, at one level, it's the ultimate hack. It's like the ultimate realization. However, there is a slight challenge we've got to this, is that when we first explore this, that mind that likes to keep coming up with meaning and stuff finds it very hard to hear. But because what we're going to explore is, what is the nature of what we are? So what I mean by that is not who's Piers, who's Christian, because I could say, hey, Christian, who are you? Tell me. And you would tell me some stuff about your life. You tell me about your background. You tell me, I tell you about your personality. You tell me all sorts of things. At one level, we're not interested in that for this moment. We're interested in knowing what we are before that. And you might be thinking, well, there's nothing there before that, right? Well, what is there before that? Is there anything there? Well, the easiest way to come into it, and lots of doors into this, would be to think about a time when you've been in real flow state. Now, that might be when you're doing sport, might be doing when you're doing work. Can you think of something now when you really find it easy to get into flow?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what would that be? What would that be that you find easy to get into flow?
Probably writing some ads, some advertising.
Right. Now, when you're doing that, and listeners, you can do the same with this. Think of something. It might be when you're singing, playing with friends, cycling, whatever it is, cooking, doesn't matter what it is. When you're in that flow state, what happens to you, the Christian, the Piers? What do you notice happens to the you?
I think it just flow with what I'm doing.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. So almost in this, when we're in this flow state, people might even say, oh, I lost myself in that book. Or I lost myself. Chat. I didn't notice time. I was just in that moment, almost like the idea of there being a separate me and a separate world kind of dissolves for a bit. And you're totally engaged in the activity. Now, what's wonderful, when that happens, there's less me going on, if you want to call it that. But our creativity, our resilience, our clarity, our connection go up. Inspiration, our energy. I mean, think about when you're doing physical exercise and you're going for a run and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got another 2 miles to go. My legs are hurting. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I can't do this. No way. And then you kind of forget about that for some reason and you get a second wind and then a mile just disappears. Well, where did that mile go? Then the mind comes back in and goes, oh, I'm tired again, right? So in flow, what we would call the self, the idea of us being a separate entity and there being a world out there kind of dissolves for a bit. And we get in this wonderful flow. Now, here's a question. I ask this to all my clients, all my workshops. I say, what percentage of your time in your average working week do you think you spend in this flow state?
very little, to be honest.
Yeah, people would say like 10% maybe, right? And they might say,
Yeah.
oh, I find it easier when I'm relaxing or socializing or whatever, but I find it harder when I'm in a meeting or something like that. So let's say, 10%. Now, imagine that got up to 40, 50, 60%, that you were just in this flow state more, or even just 10% more. That would make a huge difference. So the benefit of what I'm pointing to is amazing for all aspects, particularly where we find really challenged to get in flow, like we're having a difficult conversation or we're facing some hardship or whatever it is. Now, how are we enabling that to happen? Because there's a lot written about flow. Now, in the old days, I would have pointed to tools and techniques, maybe to meditate, maybe to do some yoga, maybe to, work hard on the mind, do some mantras, whatever it is. And they kind of work tactically. What I mean by that is it might work for a bit and then they don't. And they might work on some things, but there's some things that might be immune to that. So what we're looking for with quality of mind and before psychology is a more wholesale shift. And that wholesale shift comes from having, this might sound odd to start with, bear with me, having a realization, a profound realization or awakening, you might call it. Some people would call it awakening, and that's a bit of a fancy language, but to see the nature of what we are and to see that thing I think I've been told I am for the last, I'm 50 years old, so the last 49 years, is not truly essentially what I am. So I think I'm the Piers, I'm the combination of my thinking, blah, 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 blah. Actually, there's something that we all are before that. Now, the way you can start to see this, and I've got podcasts that go into way more detail in this, but I'll just give you a little snippet now, right? Is that in any moment, we can demerge, pull apart two parts of the human experience. One is everything that sort of comes and goes in what we think, what we perceive, what we feel. So right now, in the last 5 minutes that we've been chatting, you might be having some perceptions of your screen, some sound of my voice. You might have noticed something on your chair. You might have noticed a bit of temperature. You might have had a thought going, oh, should I tell him to be quiet now? He's rambling on. Is this a good podcast? You might have had all that going on, right? And that's just in like 3 minutes. Now, that's the content of your psychology. Thoughts, sensations, perceptions. Now, there's also been another bit going on at all that time, which isn't the content, it's the capacity for the content. Think about a metaphor now. Think about a screen, TV, and the Netflix. Think about the monitor you're looking at now and the software you've got running on the program. So the screen's always there, right? But then but what we look at is the Netflix. We look at the content. We tend to ignore the screen. Now, our version of that, coming out of the metaphor now, is that we have the capacity for awareness. And then we have the content of awareness, which is all our thoughts, perceptions, and sensations. Now, imagine for a moment you were like an alien popped into this body mind, right? You don't know anything about us. You haven't been to school here. You've just popped in. You can speak English. Otherwise, it's not going to work very well, right? But you've been popped in. And you asked us, you were asked a question, well, what is it that is fundamental and consistent and eternal and never changing about you? Is it the content of your experience, the thoughts, the perceptions, the sensations? Well, no, because they come and go. Even if some have been around a long time, they come and go. The thing that's fundamental is this, what we're talking about, this capacity for awareness, the screen, that never changes. Imagine there's an empty room, right? There's a space, and then you put furniture in it, right? The furniture isn't as fundamental as the room, and the furniture can't damage the room. Just like what you watch on your TV doesn't damage your TV, right? If you watch a bad show, it doesn't make the TV less valuable. It's not like you wouldn't buy it, right? Oh, I wouldn't buy that. You've been watching Channel 5, right? So we see that there's something that we are before our thinking, perceiving, and feeling. Now, here's the big mistake, big misunderstanding, innocent, invisible. We think that thing that's there fundamentally about us is me, the Piers, me, the Christian, right? And that I am this little body mind, and I have this brain thing, and I have these senses, and I have eyes and I have ears, and everything's coming towards me. Like there's the me and there's the world. Now, here's another question, and I'll tie this all up in a moment because I realize we're going kind of deep here. But have you ever experienced anything outside of the mind?
For example,
Well, I don't know. I mean, is it possible to experience anything outside of the mind?
in terms of feelings,
Well, anything like if you're looking at a tree, I'm just taking really simple, or a car, or you're looking at a pen, right? Do you experience that outside of the mind?
yes, of course.
No, sorry. What I mean by that is the mind involved in you perceiving that?
I'm not sure about it. I never.
Well, if you think, okay, so think of something you're looking at right now, which might be your laptop, right, or your PC. Now, to see that PC, to have the perception, it's coming, let's call it via the mind. Yeah. Now, it's impossible, which is what I'm going to say, but I'd love you to be that alien and check it out for yourself, right? To experience anything in the human experience outside of the mind. So even though we've been told the tree, the bus, the car, the laptop is outside of the mind, as in there's an external world of things and there's an internal world of thoughts. So normally we get told, oh, you've got thoughts, which are internal, right? That's my mind. That's in my mind. I had a thought about lunch, right?
I start to get where you're going.
Yeah, right. And then we're told, oh no, there's external stuff like the tree or the other person. We've been told the world is dual. There's duality. There's internal stuff, external stuff. Now, my question is, that external stuff, has anyone ever experienced that?
Without a mind.
Yeah, without a mind.
No, I think you will miss the awareness without the mind.
Right. So even scientists who are meant to be studying the external world of atoms and molecules and matter are still using the mind. Now, the difference would be when someone would say, oh, yeah, but the stuff outside the mind stays there when you're not there. So if I walk out of the room now, the laptop I'm looking at would still be there. Well, we don't know that. Well, someone would go, I'll put a camera in the corner of your room and I'll show you, Piers. I'll show you it's still there. No, because you're still looking at the camera through the mind, right? So it's kind of impossible. So here's the weird thing that I think an alien would say about us, right? The alien looking at us would go, well, hang on a minute, scientists. You're saying what is fundamental to these human beings is this stuff called matter, this stuff called atoms and molecules, and that creates a brain, and then the brain creates consciousness that then has a conscious experience of the tree, drinking coffee, whatever it is. So it says matter comes first, consciousness comes second, and the brain creates consciousness. Now, from direct experience, as I just asked you, from us, we can see that, well, I've never experienced this world of matter without consciousness. Yeah. So why would it come first, given I've never experienced it without? And secondly, science has yet to find, and it's called the hard problem of consciousness, where or how the brain boots up consciousness. It can see that if you put someone in an fMRI or an ECG and you show them different things, they have different bits of the brain lining up, definitely. And if you put a big magnet on one side of your head, half your vision goes black and white. So it affects perception, but there's no causation. There's no causation. And then you get really fascinating studies now that are showing that when people are having a really rich experience of the world, they're feeling very inspired, they're feeling very creative, they have less brain activity, right? Less. Well, if everything was coming from the brain, surely I'd be having more brain activity because I'm having such a wonderful experience. Or people, when they have NDEs, which is a near-death experience, they have totally profound, rich experiences of perception whilst being brain dead. So you start to see, oh, right. So maybe we're not brain centric. Maybe because I was always taught that the brain was the epicenter. Everything was coming from me and I was seeing this external world. But you start to see, no, actually, there's something more fundamental. And what I'm seeing in the world and me is an illusion. It's what I call real but never true. So it's real because we can see it, hear it, feel it, but it's not true. It's not happening objectively. There's no objective world. Now, you might think, well, hang on, how is this helpful? How is this helpful? Well, we live life as if the world can do stuff to us. That's point one. Like, oh, the economic market, the weather, other people, what's going on can do things to us, and we therefore reduce our psychological freedom. Point one. Point two, we think in order to be happy, successful, content, be inspired, that me, the Piers or the Christian, has to do stuff with our thinking and everything to get there. Now, if we realize that what we are is more like an avatar, so, I was saying that thoughts come and go. Well, one of the biggest thoughts that comes and goes is me. The idea of me comes and goes. And when I'm not having thought about me, I'm actually doing better. Right, I'm in flow. So the idea of me having lots of thoughts about me, trying to be a better person in this world, gets in my way. Whereas we've been taught, oh, you need to manage your thinking, you need to do all these things. So what I'm saying is that when we recognize there's a amazing intelligence to the design, there's flow state available about anything, and that's available for any single human being in any moment, regardless to their conditioning or anything like that. And just all we've done is we've innocently, accidentally got caught up in thinking there's an external world out there that can do stuff to us. And the way we deal with this world is through this sort of finite me that is limited. And we then try and control that. When we recognize that, we kind of go back into a place where we have infinite resourcefulness that just sort of comes through the system. Synchronicity and serendipity happen, flow states happen. And the world's a much easier place to be in. Now, I've just given you like a whole overview of everything I talk about in about 7 minutes there. I don't know what you want to dive into now, but hopefully there was something in there that piqued your interest.
I would be curious about what you think about manifestation and what everything says about it.
Great question, because there's a lot to manifestation, and there's a load of BS, right? So it's definitely the case what I would call your aperture and the level where you come from to the world makes a difference to what turns up. Right. So it's almost like, and this language is always a little bit clunky, but I'll just say it this way. The level that you sort of vibrate at does seem to make a difference to what gets created. Now, here's the thing. What people therefore think is, right, I need to manifest at the right level in order to get my attraction to my next client or my new car or whatever it is, right? And then the self, you know, that self thing I told about, that the sort of the Piers Christian starts to get attached to that. And there's an intention, but the problem is that accidentally, that desire for that thing is actually coming from scarcity, because it's not neutral. So, and if you come from scarcity, you're actually vibrating at a different level, right? Which means the serendipity and the synchronicity and of creation doesn't happen. So here's the answer to that. And it sounds a bit little paradoxical to start with, that we need a total neutrality to the intention. You can call it neutral intention. So think about it this way. The things that have just sort of rocked up for you in your world, right? And it might be as simple as a parking space. Yeah. I remember once I was driving around and I was on holiday with my kids, and we said to someone, where do we park? And they said, well, there's one street you can park on that's free and really near the hotel, but you won't get a space there. It's always full. I go, and they go, okay, there's another car park around the other side. It's a bit further away, but you drive there. Blah, blah, blah. I said to the kids, let's drive down this one road anyway, heading to the other car park. And I just sort of said something like, who knows? Right. And a little like, oh, maybe we'll get a space there. Total neutrality and a little intention. We drove up the street, no paces. So I went to the roundabout, turned around, came back. And on the way back, it's almost like this space just came out of nowhere. Right. It was like Harry Potter. It was like, pop. I was like, wow. I got out of the car and almost had to like touch the ground going, did this just happen? So minor example there of intention, but total neutrality. Now, macro that up to something more meaningful than a car park space, a relationship,
It depends where
business,
you live.
right? Yeah, right. Yeah, that's because it's not really about parking spaces, is it? Right? Is how often do we get attached to the outcome? The new house, the new thing, the new business, the new client, right? We get this self, this conditioned avatar self, so wants it. And it's like, I really want it. Now, that means there's no neutrality. So where we can get to is we can get to a place where we are completely neutral about whether whatever it is, the creation happens or not. And yet we can still have the possibility or the intention, the commitment even, to point to the faculty of thinking in that direction. And that will all come from our programming, right? There's no free will. That's the other, and that is a big topic, which maybe we won't get into fully here, but I've got other episodes on this. There's no free will. Now, you might think, oh no, that's terrible news because I need to make the world a certain way. Actually, when we realize there's no free will, it's beautiful because it really helps that neutrality when you realize it's not you. Right?
Now you have to go deeper into it.
We have to go
You can't
deeper.
just leave us hang
Okay.
out here.
Here's an experiment for you, right? So if you think you can do this about anything, right? But I'm going to take this glass of water now. Okay. So do I have free will to drink my water? Normally people would go, yeah, of course you do, Piers. You can just take a sip now. Now, again, go and be that alien, right? Now, in order for me to be able to drink the water, a thought, either there's just an impulsive reaction for me to drink it, or a thought comes in saying, have some water. So if the thought comes in, I then could drink the water, or I could go, I'm not going to have the water. But both of those thoughts arise in awareness on the screen of content, right? I don't put them in there, right? So if a thought turns up about the water, that didn't come from me. I didn't choose, oh, please put a thought in that says that. Because if it did, wow, we'd find it easier to change habits, right? If we could literally control what thoughts came into our mind, no one would ever be overweight, no one would ever spend money on stupid things, no, you know. So if the thought occurs to me to have the water, I have the water. If the thought doesn't occur to me, I don't. So I don't get to choose which thought comes in. And even if the thought comes in saying, do you want some water? I also don't choose whether I say yes to that thought, because that saying yes to that thought is also another thought. Now, so at cognitive level, there's another level I'll go to in a minute, but at cognitive level, can you see how the thoughts appear in awareness, right? They don't come from me, because me is a thought too, right? They come from the system. They come from nature, if you want to call it nature. They come from somewhere. They actually come from a combination of all our programming in nature and aperture, right? But they turn up. So if they turn up, the thing happens. If they don't, they don't. That's not me. Now, where people get confused is you recognize that we evolve over time. So I now have different thoughts to I did 5 years ago about what I eat and what I do. So it's not like they're the same thoughts. And maybe it's because I've read about, oh, you know, don't eat red meat, don't, you know. So you could go, well, because I read about this stuff, I decided to have a healthy a healthier diet. That was me doing that. That's my free will. Well, no, because I didn't choose to read the books. You know, however far you go back, it was still never me. It's still the system, if I can, or consciousness, people might call it. Just like if there was a tree which had 10,000 leaves that drops its leaves, one leaf drops on Tuesday at 4 o'clock and one leaf drops on Wednesday at 3 o'clock, and they slightly fall in different places. There's 1,000 factors affecting why that leaf dropped then and why, and we'd all just go, well, that's nature, right? That's not the tree. The tree doesn't decide. Nature does that. Now, because we have this appearance of a me with what looks like free will, we go, well, I'm different to the tree. Yeah. Animals we put in between. We go, well, does the dog know it's doing that? Did the dog deliberately do that? So trees, we go, no free will. Us, we go, yes. Dogs, we go in the middle, right? I'm just kind of putting this out. But actually, we don't have it either. We have the apparent choosing, absolutely, the apparent thinking. So put it this way, there's choosing, but there's no chooser, no separate chooser.
Can you please clarify
Test this out for yourself. Test this out for yourself. What do you hear in that?
So there is choosing, but not chooser.
Yeah, the same. Actually, there's doing and no doer.
So what about taking responsibility? How would that work then?
Oh, huge implications for that, right? Because in theory, you could go, our legal system is all based on the idea that, and actually they have a defense called diminished responsibility or insanity, where you go, well, I didn't know what I was doing, you know, and children don't get in trouble for doing stuff, you know. So the legal system, for example, would have a challenge. But what we have to do in society is we have a system which means we're all, if you like, custodians of our own experience. And this, what happens is still put down to the individual me, right? So if I drive at 90 miles an hour on the motorway, I might get a speeding ticket. I don't say, oh, well, it's consciousness and I didn't do that. You know, that's not a defense. So because, and that organizes society in a nice way. Now, and that the fact of that is that our programming does make a difference to the choices we make, or the choices that are made by the system, right? So most of us in society get educated in a certain way, right? So I'll just take the law about speeding, for example, right? So we all get conditioned in that way, and that gets into our programming, knowing those sort of things, right? So society just makes a call going, well, you should know that. Yeah. Now, you're right. There are probably many people sitting in prison right now going, I didn't feel like I had choice. I didn't feel like when I pulled the trigger on my gangmate, or whatever, it felt impulsive. I just did it. Yeah. They even call it a crime of passion sometimes. Yeah. Where you were so caught up in the moment. Sometimes that means a mitigation in sentence. So I'm looking at it from that respect. Now, if you look at it from personal responsibility about going into the world and treating people in the right way, right? Because there's a phrase called spiritual bypassing, where people go, oh yeah, I know this stuff, and that means if I'm mean to you, that's your problem, not mine. Well, that's not. Actually, if you look at the innate human system, right? Babies and children are the closest we get to innate. You start to see that there's actually kind of a kindness in the system. So what you tend to find is that when people have this understanding that I'm talking about, they don't get more kind of removed from the world and not care about anyone else and go, well, hey, that's not me. They actually get more empathetic, more compassionate, and they take responsibility, because that's what our conditioning does. Animal kingdom doesn't have responsibility. If one dog hits another dog, they don't get in trouble, right? But because we're a little more involved, so you can still have this personal responsibility. So there's still a traceability for your own programming turning up in the world. And here's the most fascinating thing I've noticed, particularly in the last few years, is that I start to see that what's turning up in the world for me about the choices that appear and are made, and the perceptions that are being perceived, are showing me something about my own conditioning, which evolves you, right? So if I get really annoyed by something, the system of me gets really annoyed, that's showing me something about where my conditioning is a little caught up. So actually, there is a value. So therefore, I want personal responsibility, because I'm like, that's still individuated as me. So it's not like you can just go, no, it's something to do with me, I don't care. Actually, it goes the other way. You get more, you feel more collectively responsible for the planet, not responsible, but more in connection with the planet and other people, because you're no longer seeing this separation of deification of the self.
Got it.
Might be
Yes,
too
can
big
you
an answer,
share?
sorry.
Yes, can you share examples or case where using your approach has notably impacted personal growth or business success in the real
Yeah.
world?
Yeah. So I mean, I can do it for my life or all my clients, but let's take people let's take an entrepreneur or someone running their own business. And I work with a lot of people who are doing that. So there can be a lot of uncertainty when you're running your own business, a lot of ambiguity. And that can, if people are in the wrong, what I would call aperture, be really stressful, right? And that's sometimes why people stop running their own thing, because they're like, oh, I just want a secure job. Now, once you recognize what we're pointing to here, what my clients find is that actually that ambiguity, that not knowing, doesn't create the anxiety anymore, because they see, well, okay, it doesn't matter so much whether I know whether X, Y, or Z is going to happen, because I don't need that certainty, because I don't control it anyway. And that's the first thing they know. And the second thing they know, there's a resourcefulness to deal with what does turn up. Yeah. Which you won't be able to know right now. So you could say to someone, well, what happens in 6 months' time if this goes wrong with your business? And the person would, my client would probably say, well, I don't know. But I don't need to know, because when that comes, I know how resourcefulness works. I know how flow state works. And something will emerge that will, guide me through that, or enable me to deal with that. So rather than go, oh my gosh, these things could happen, all this kind of, we have a lot of future bias going on in our conditioning. That all disappears. which is great. And you're more, and it comes back to having this neutral intention about your business. So a lot of people, you know, when they're first starting out, they're doing their business because they want to get it. They want to get somewhere. They want to achieve a certain financial gain or a certain societal status gain, and they're attached, right? And therefore the business becomes all about the destination. Now, what's much more fun when you're running your own business is for it to be about the sailing, the journey, right? Wherever it happens to go. So a metaphor often people would talk about in the work I do is you change from rowing to sailing. Now, rowing is, I need to get there. I need to work really hard using lots of psychological discipline. And so the 5 a.m. club, like get up really early, smash this out, smash that out, do this, push, 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 which is great at one level, but it's really hard work. Balance tends to go out the window. And you can, after a while, even though you get some quick wins, you start to get tired and then you lose your mojo. That's what I call rowing, right? Now, imagine sailing where you understand to get the boat to go somewhere, you learn about the wind and you put the oars down. You've got to put the oars down. You can't have half oars, half sail. It doesn't really work. And then people run their own business. They sort of sail. And actually they get to new places they didn't even know about. And even when things aren't going to the destination they thought, that's okay because they're still loving the being in the boat. Right? So you get more freedom, more flow, more resilience, more creativity, and more balance, I would say.
I love this metaphor.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. For our listeners who want to delve deeper into this topic, what resources or practices would you recommend?
Well, the resources I would point to, well, I've got some of my own, which is the Quality of Mind podcast. And we've got the podcast and we've got some YouTubes. And then if people want to get into, I'll give a couple of directions now. So if people want to get into the sort of the more deeper side of it, right, which is the profound understanding that unlocks it all, then it's actually based on what we call direct path non-duality. And there's some now, that didn't used to, but now there's some great resources around that. People like Rupert Spira is a guy that talks about that. I can put all this in the show notes.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, another guy called Michael Neal, he's a bit more practical. He comes at this. It's a growing field. It's very small, but it's growing. And a lot of it is growing because people are getting a little disenchanted or frustrated with the conventional way of doing it, which tends to work for a bit and stop working. The most powerful, wonderful thing about this approach is that once people see it, and it has to be realized, it can't just be read about, you've got it for life. And that's the most amazing thing about my work, is when people wake up to this, decades of benefit for everything, not just for work, not just for hobbies, but for everything. So, but it does, to start with, a little bit of tuning in to what we're talking about, because it might all sound too abstract or profound or gobbledygook, but it doesn't take long, especially if we go the direct route, for people to see it.
Yeah, I think it takes some time to process.
Absolutely. It's not a gist thing, right? A lot of things in, you know, everyone wants bite size. They all want 30 seconds of this, 30 seconds of that. This, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, just because of where we're set up, takes a little bit. But once it, you know, you get that kind of ding, wow, there's power in that. There's real power in that. But you have to sort of switch off your current thinking to get there.
How can our audience stay engaged or continue learning about the power of the mind?
Well, as I put in the show notes, LinkedIn, YouTube, podcasts, and my biggest recommendation would be to be okay to press pause on what you know currently, because what we're pointing to here, one of the problems is, and you think, why is this a problem? It's so profoundly simple, but you can't hear it through your current conditioning because it just sounds like, well, there's nothing there. So the biggest thing I can suggest to people is to, anything, you know, I point to, listen to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, right? Because every time you listen, you'll hear something, oh, wow. And the more you can press pause on what you know currently, because it's an undoing this. It's a subtractive psychology. It's an undoing of everything we've learned. And for me, 15 years of coaching I had to let go of to get here. So I was a slow learn because I'd had so much learning the other way. And we're going backwards here. But we're taking ourselves back out of our psychology to something more fundamental and actually simple. It's not easy to start with, but it's simple.
Once you get it.
Yeah, that's it. There's a
Yes,
little
thank
hump.
you so much. Really, I have to re-listen these episodes many times because there are some of the passages quite profound. And
Yeah,
I love the idea, the metaphor that you share, trying to get dry under the shower. So I think that it really picture the message.
yeah. Good.
So
Well, and I'm open to, if anyone's curious, I know it's a little bit of a difficult thing to, mind-boggling to start with, reach out. Please do reach out.
awesome. Thank you so much, Piers. Have a great day. Talk to you
And
soon.
you.
Take care, my friend.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.